Good morning, everyone. Thank you for logging on and joining us today. As Karina said, today's session is going to be all about the ESTEEM project, which stands for European Safety Training and Evaluation Supporting European Mobility. So it's all about trying to enhance safety for construction workers. And Karina and I, along with other colleagues, have been working on the project for the past 3 years. So we just want to give you a little insight into it and what we've been up to. So we're going to start off with just a few statistics to set the scene, and then we'll think about why migrant construction workers in particular are most vulnerable. Then move on to briefly outline the aims of the ESTEEM project, and then we'll run through the 6 key outputs and what we've learned so far from the pilot testing that we've been running. So health and safety is a massive issue across the world. And the ILO estimate that there are around 2.78 million deaths at work every year and over 374 million work-related accidents. So that means that every 15 seconds, approximately 1 worker dies and 150 have an accident or injury. So in the 1.5 minutes I've been talking to you so far, that means we've lost 6 workers and around 900 have been injured. So this is a staggering statistics we're looking at which need addressing. And the construction sector is particularly high risk. The nature of the work, working at heights, working with machinery, different materials. There's often long supply chains of different contractors working on the same site, people coming from different countries, different nationalities. There's lots of risks inherent within the construction industry. And in the EU, the UK, America, Canada, Australia, around 1/5 of all accidents at work occur in the construction industry. And the figures there for the fatality rates per 100,000 workers in the UK and the USA are around 3 times as high as they are across all other industries. So a particularly high risk industry we're concerned with. And the construction industry is heavily reliant on migrant workers, and with migrant workers we're using the definition taken from the United Nations, which is talking about non-national workers. So foreign-born males are much more likely to work in construction than our native-born males. You can see there around 15% of over 2 million construction workers in the UK are thought to be non-national. And they're particularly at risk of accidents and injuries. So some figures there, 2/3 of migrant workers who died in the UK 2007-2008 worked in construction. And if we think about that the other way around, that equates to 17% of construction workers who died were migrants, despite accounting for only 8% of the working population at that time. So we've got a particularly high risk industry, and we've got a particularly vulnerable group of workers. And there are multiple reasons why migrant workers are so vulnerable. Language barriers is one of the key reasons. We've got workers coming from all across the world, speaking different languages. They have difficulties understanding safety information on site, understanding instructions, engaging with safety training. They're also unfamiliar often with the rules and regulations of the host country. So that means that they may be not abiding by the rules simply because they're not aware of them. Difficulties with language also means that workers are often siloed on site, so they don't integrate very well, and then they fail to learn the norms and regulations. And there are also cultural differences. So for example, in Latin American cultures where machismo, very prominent, very masculine culture, wearing of personal protective equipment, for example, is seen as a sign of weakness. So lots of different reasons why migrant workers are particularly vulnerable. There's also lots of issues to do with the labour market conditions. We've got migrant workers coming into the country, perhaps on unstable employment contracts, unstable immigration status. So they're ripe for exploitation. They're willing to work in worse conditions with less safety equipment for less money, because often they're desperate to earn money to send back to their families. So they experience adverse working conditions. And a prime example of this is thinking of Qatar building for the World Cup 2022, and the Nepalese and Bangladeshi and Indian workers that suffered terribly out there. So lots of reasons why migrant workers in particular are at risk. And this is what the ESTEEM project is all about. We want to try and improve safety in construction, particularly for these most vulnerable workers. So we want to find out why these accidents and injuries occur and see if safety training can be developed to help reduce the risk. And then also how we can evaluate the effectiveness of such safety training. And that's a key area that's missing at the moment, actually seeing how effective this safety training is. So these are the three aims of the ESTEEM project. And we're a multidisciplinary, multinational team. So there's the University of Sheffield. We've also got partners at the University of Valencia and the University of Bologna. We've got 2 training partners as well in Spain and Italy. We've got Valora Prevention and IPLE. And in the UK, we didn't have an official training partner, but we have been helped out along the way by IOSH, CITB and the HSE. So bringing together academics and practitioners to try and develop some effective safety training within the industry. And there are 6 key outputs projects. So we've got the safety training knowledge base, our interactive platform, the training package, the evaluation device, the certificate system, and then our guidelines. So I'm going to run through the first 3 now. Karina's then going to talk more about the evaluation device, and then I'll pick up on the last 2. So the safety training knowledge base, this was delivered by the team in Valencia. They were leading this package, and this involved a review of the academic and the grey literature. So this really underpinned all the other outputs. We wanted to see what current knowledge and understanding is there out there in relation to safety training for low-skilled and migrant construction workers. And in terms of the review of the academic literature, from an initial 2,600 odd papers, there were only actually 18 studies that focused on safety training for this particular group of workers. And of these, the majority were conducted in the US with Hispanic and Latino workers. There were no studies done in Europe, and there was only 1 study done since 2013. So there's a big gap here in terms of our knowledge and understanding. In relation to the grey literature, so this involved analysing current safety training provision, different laws and regulations, statistics around accidents and injuries, and looking at existing health and safety bodies. And the team in Valencia identified over 400 different sources, different websites, web pages, bits of information, all of which are available on our website, which I'll come on to shortly. And then we also did a range of interviews and focus groups in the UK, Spain and Italy, looking to hear firsthand what different construction workers, site supervisors, trainers and WASH practitioners, so occupational safety and health practitioners, think about the current state of safety training in the construction industry. And what we found was that it's not sufficient to just translate existing materials. We have to develop tailored safety training to overcome the language barriers, the cultural differences. And there's a real need to use multiple training methods. So games, role play, practical exercises, a mixture of different teaching methods increases learning. Another thing that came through particularly strongly was the need to not just teach about technical skills, but also non-technical or soft skills. So communication, team working, being aware of your surroundings, decision-making, fatigue and stress management. These are all key skills which need to be taught alongside the more technical aspects in order to improve safety on site. And then, as I mentioned briefly before, we need to think about how we can evaluate the effectiveness of safety training. This is something that's really missing at the moment, but it's really important for us to know and understand, are people actually using their safety training once they get back onto the site? And if they're not, what is it that's preventing them from doing so? So that's our first output, which really underpins all the rest of them. We've then got our online platforms. So the top picture there is our ESTEEM website hosted by the University of Sheffield, and this is where we post all the activities we've been up to. All our materials will be made freely available on there, different training materials, presentations that we've done. And then the bottom picture is our interactive online platform, which forms part of the safety training package, which I'm going to go on to discuss now. But the 2 links there, so do have a look and have a nosy around those sites. So the safety training package, developed from the knowledge and understanding from the first output, really drew on the fact that we wanted to train technical and non-technical skills together. And it used a range of face-to-face teaching methods and online teaching. So the e-learning wall there is taught through the online platform on the previous slide. And it's taught in a series of learning walls. We thought that was a good way to represent the construction industry. 5 walls of 4 hours each in Spain and Italy. In the UK, we don't do wall number 2 because that's the mandatory safety training that's currently delivered by the CITB. Each wall covers a range of different topics, technical and non-technical skills, and then there's a test at the beginning and the end to assess people's level of learning, and hopefully that's improved having taken the training. So just an example here from one of the learning walls. This is wall 3. So you can see there we're teaching about a range of different hazards, electrical, chemical, physical, alongside the non-technical skills, so really combining them together so that the non-technical aren't seen as an added extra. A range of different classroom activities and then online activities through the training platform. So there's an example here of one of the classroom activities. So this one is about the hazards of working at height and with scaffolding and ladders. Real life examples shown in videos. Trainees would discuss in small groups, see what behaviours they could identify, what could have been done better, and then discussion as a group with the rest of the trainees and the trainer as a whole. And this is what the online platform looks like. So for each wall, there's an overview of what the objectives are, what different skills you can expect, and a whole series there you can see of different activities and games related to that content to reinforce that learning. So this is one of the examples of one of the games. So this is related to risks at height again. We've got 2 different pictures and you simply drag whichever one you believe to be the correct behaviour into the middle, click on check answer, and it gives you some feedback. So here, the idea is that you shouldn't be climbing up the scaffolding, but should be going underneath and through a hatch. And then it gives you some feedback as well. So again, all designed to reinforce the learning during the face-to-face training. I'm going to hand over to Karina now for the safety training evaluation device.
Thank you, Rose, and I hope everybody can hear and see me now. So what we did was that we tested the training in Spain and Italy. We were planning on doing it in the UK as well. But unfortunately, just as we were about to start, then the pandemic happened, and unfortunately that threw our plans. But here you can see the number of trainers or training that we had in Italy, and we had more in Spain. So you can see in total we trained 107 workers, of which just over half were migrant workers. And as Rose mentioned, we wanted to mix them up, hoping that that could facilitate transfer into the workplace and developing shared values and norms. So what we did was that we developed a mixed method training evaluation package where we used a number of different methods. We used before and after surveys, using questionnaires for migrant workers and workers who had participated in the training. We had observations during the training course. We had interviews with supervisors 3 months after the training had been completed to see whether they had observed any changes in behaviors, and also asking them about the strategies for supporting workers transferring what they had learned to the work site. We also interviewed workers themselves who had been in training 6 months after the training to understand how they had used the training, what were the barriers and facilitators to using training. We also had a knowledge test before and after that was integrated into the training itself. In terms of the evaluation, we used Kirkpatrick's training evaluation model, and I'm sure many of you will be familiar with that because it's the most dominant training evaluation model out there. But it has been criticized for focusing only on 4 levels of outcomes. So reactions, how do people on the training react to what's going on during the training? What do they think of the material, the trainers, the structure of the training? The next level of the evaluation model is learning. So have they actually learned anything? We use the knowledge test here and reports of learning in interviews. Then the third level is actually changes in behaviors. So changes in behaviors once you return to the workplace. And here we looked at safety compliance. So whether you use personal protection equipment, PPE, and follow safety procedures in the workplace. But also we looked at soft skills and non-technical skills that Rose just mentioned. At the fourth level of the Kirkpatrick model, we have the results. So do we see any changes in safety climate? Although Kirkpatrick's model is the dominant model in the field, it has also been criticized because it focuses on outcomes only, not actually what happens once you return to the workplace. And there's another body of literature that looks at the training transfer. So actually whether behaviors or skills and knowledge learned during training translates into behaviors in the workplace, and are these behaviors maintained over time? So building on the Baldwin and Ford training transfer model from 1988, we looked at the actual transfer. So to which extent do people who've been on training perceive that they need to make changes to translate the skills and knowledge they have acquired during training into actual changes in behaviors? How well does it translate into the workplace? And we also know from the training transfer literature that the context is important, in particular when it comes to training, whether your peers or your colleagues back at the workplace and your supervisors are supportive of you applying skills and knowledge. That's crucial. So that's what we looked at in our evaluation. And I'll now go through these 4 levels, including the 2 additional aspects in terms of training transfer and support from peers and supervisors. So at the first level, we interviewed about the reactions to the training 6 months later, and we got very positive feedback on what they thought about the training itself. They thought the structure was good, the topics were interesting, they were relevant topics, they could use them. They had a really positive view of the group activities, the materials that we presented, both the videos and also the slides, and they really liked the trainers. They thought they were experienced and could relate to their experiences in the workplace. We've included some of the quotes, but the important thing here is that they really liked the materials, they liked the trainers, and we also found that they liked the online material, the additional games and stuff, because that helped them understand better what they had learned during the face-to-face training. So overall, when we look at the reactions to training, it was really positive. At the next level, we've got learning, and we looked at both technical skills and also non-technical skills or soft skills. So in the knowledge test, we saw that trainees got on average 11% more responses correct in both the Spanish and the Italian sample. So that's really good. That does indicate that they have learned the technical skills. It suggests that our training did produce a greater understanding of the safety indicators, the signs and expectations of working safely in the workplace. So again, that's good news. When we talked to workers 6 months later, the one thing they talked most about when they talked about technical skills was the use of PPE, personal protection equipment. They had become much more aware of wearing a harness when they needed to and using PPE when it was required. But they also remembered other things like the signage and using masks or expiry dates of the equipment that they were using. So all in all, in terms of technical skills, we can conclude that learning did happen. In terms of the soft skills or non-technical skills that Rose was talking about, we kind of said, okay, so if they can mention these skills or they can describe them, even if not using the formal terms such as communication and teamwork or stress and fatigue management, then it's an indication that they had learned something. And a lot of them said that the key thing they had learned during the training was the non-technical skills or the soft skills. And I mean, this is quite innovative. Most often safety training focuses on the technical skills only. So I think this was an eye-opener to many. But there are also these kind of more safety climate issues that are relevant. So that's what we heard a lot in the interviews, that was the most novelty for them. And they had learned from them. So some of the things they said is that I've learned to take care of myself and take care of my colleagues. And a lot of what we're trying to teach them is it's not about you being safe in the workplace. You as a whole, together with your colleagues, you need to work safely in order to prevent accidents and injuries. And some of them could mention them like teamwork, communication, situational awareness. So it wasn't only that they could describe what it was, they could directly mention the terms that we had used for non-technical skills. It's all very well that they learn something, but if it's not translated into the workplace, as Rose said, it doesn't really matter, because then we are unlikely to see any changes in safety behaviours in the workplace. So what we did was that we looked at the extent to which they felt they'd had to make adaptations when they were trying to apply skills and knowledge, or whether they could be translated into different settings. And we found that they basically said, no, we didn't have to make any adaptations to what we were working with or what we learned in the training course. We could use it directly. It was pretty much straight to the letter that we could use it. And what is especially important in the construction sector is that workers move from building site to building site. But what we also heard was that they say, well, these skills and knowledge, it's the same everywhere. The safety issues are the same wherever you go in the construction industry. So you have to be mindful of the same things. And the skills and knowledge that they had learned, they felt could be used in any construction site they worked at, whether it was a small or a large construction site. So that's really encouraging as well, because they felt that, okay, what I've learned is actually something that's easily transferable to the workplace. In terms of behaviours, we tested the non-technical skills in terms of safety compliance, whether they used PPE and whether they adhered to safety procedures. We used the survey to collect that data to understand how compliant they were with the safety procedures and use of PPE before training and 6 months after the training had been completed. Unfortunately, when we did these analyses, we didn't find any differences, and I'll come back to why that might be the case in a minute. But we did find, when we interviewed them 6 months later, that they did use hard skills. They in particularly used PPE to a higher extent than they did before. So there are some contradicting results here, but in the interviews we could see that they had used it. In terms of the non-technical behaviors or the soft skills, we found even worse results, because we did the same again. We studied the non-technical skills before they went on training and 6 months after they had completed the training. And actually what we found, we didn't find any significant effects. But we did find significant effects was that they scored lower on situational awareness, so the identification of hazards and making decisions about safety hazards. But there's a big but here. We also asked them whether they were working at the time of the follow-up survey. And 30% reported in the survey that they did not work at this time. And of course, that influences your responses in the questionnaire, both in terms of the technical skills, but also the soft skills, because if you're not in an actual construction site, then of course you don't necessarily engage in safety behaviours. So we think that's part of the explanation for why we find these results. We should also say that only about half, 57%, of our workers that have been on training completed the questionnaire, and we also think that that enormous dropout is probably also due to the fact that many of them weren't working. Spain and Italy had exactly the same issues that in the UK, with lockdown restrictions, and many construction sites were closed down. But it's not all doom and gloom, because when we interviewed them, they said had in the past used decision-making skills and other soft skills, even if they hadn't actually been working at the time of the survey and at the time of the interviews. When they were working, they really had translated the skills and knowledge around soft skills into soft skills use and behaviors in the workplace. So we saw indications of teamwork, situational awareness, decision making, and fatigue and stress management. So they said we use a lot of soft skills like decision making, situational awareness. I've learned that I have to carry out the work safely and I have to pay more attention when I'm working. So you have to scan the environment for what are the potential hazards that I come across when I work in the construction site. So they are much more careful when they have to do specific processes. And again, as I said before, teamwork, they've learned to take care of themselves and their colleagues. It's not necessarily that they could remember one episode, but they put in practice a lot of the knowledge that they have learned. We also had one worker that gave us a really good example about fatigue and stress management and also communication, because he basically said, well, there was an issue where a colleague was tired and very angry, and he got into an argument with one of the others. And basically, I had to calm him down and send him home because he was just so tired. So I think that those are all really good examples. Although we don't find any significant increases in these behaviors, we did find examples of these behaviors being applied in the construction site. In terms of the wider results, we looked at safety climate change. We didn't measure it before and after, but we looked at it in interviews. And what I think is really encouraging here is that we can see that it was not only the people that had gone on the training course that we saw a change in. They also reported a more general change in terms of that they work in teams, they communicate more, whether they've been on training or not. In the workplace as a whole or in the construction side as a whole, they communicate more. So it's all about being responsible together, regardless of whether you've been on training or not. But of course, this doesn't happen. Transfer doesn't happen if you don't have colleagues and supervisors that are supportive of you applying your skills once you return to the workplace. And generally, we know this is an issue from the literature, but we have to say in our case, we did find very positive reports from workers when they were interviewed 6 months later. So they said that colleagues had been very supportive, they had a positive reaction, and they had welcome talks about the training and the use of non-technical skills. They also reported that supervisors had been very supportive, and trainees said he had a positive reaction. He discussed with me and we talked together about safety. Yes, he encourages us to work safely. And it's not just the persons that have been on training, it's also everybody in the workplace. So having workers go on training would actually raise the awareness of supervisors as well. As I mentioned in the beginning, we also interviewed supervisors about what strategies they used to support training transfer. And one supervisor gives this example. I usually talk to them afterwards and try to talk to them again after some time, so making sure that it's on their mind. And says it's really important that workers are involved in the safety organization. Other strategies we saw was that supervisors would give them specific tasks, for example, using harness or something like that, so that they would actually practice their safety behaviors that they had learned during the training course. And that was what we had found in terms of results. So now I'll hand back over to Rose.
Thank you, Karina. Yes, so just now to run through the final two outputs. Our colleagues in Italy have been busy developing some certificates. We wanted to acknowledge, obviously, the trainers who had helped us deliver the training, and also those who have participated. So we have a trainer certificate, so any trainer that took part in the train the trainer session, for example, or who delivered the training for us or continues to deliver the training, will be able to have a trainer certificate saying that they've qualified to train people in the ESTEEM training. And the trainees as well get one certificate when they complete the face-to-face training. And then we also have an excellence certificate. So for trainees who continue to use their knowledge and learning once they get back onto the construction site, so transferring their training. And also as part of the project, we have honorary trainees. So if you've ever been to any of our events before, you will have received a certificate. So for all of you who are attending this session today, we do have an attendance certificate for you, so we'll be sending those out to you in due course. And then we have our safety training guidelines. So these really bring together all of the other outputs developed for a range of stakeholders, and they showcase the best practice guidelines in safety training. So I'll just show you the website that Valora Prevention have developed. So this is where all of the guidelines are hosted. As you can see there are specific sections for OSH practitioners, for supervisors, for trainers, and for workers themselves. And these guidelines are available in English, Spanish, and Italian. If we just have a look at a couple of the pages, so this one is under the trainer section. So if you click on the icon for course organisation, for example, it takes you through to all the details about the training course and how it's designed. The training package will take the trainers through to all the materials for each of the training walls. This is just continuing down the same page. We also have detailed guidance for the trainers to use. So you can see there the methodological guide. So this takes the trainers through step by step what they need to do at each stage of the training process. So which activities relate to which slides, when they need to show a certain video, different materials that they need to use. And the same for the evaluation. So Karina talked through all the different forms of evaluation that we're using to assess whether trainees are learning and then transferring their skills. And we have a detailed user guide which trainers can use to assess how effective their training has been. So again, it takes them through step by step when they should send out which surveys, for example, how they can then analyse that data, how they can develop different measures and so on. So all very detailed, and all of these are available free of charge on the, or will be available free of charge on the ESTEEM website. And then in relation to the workers, again, a separate section of the guidelines website, lots of information about the non-technical skills that we've talked about throughout the presentation, and we've developed, or Valora Prevention, sorry, have developed these pocket guides. So the key bits of information, so you can have it on hand in a leaflet. So talking through what the different technical skills are, why they're important, just to remind the trainees to use them as much as possible in their day-to-day working. We also have pocket guides for wearing PPE, for the different chemicals, for emergency situations as well. So lots of different information available on the guidelines website, so that whoever is interested can come along. You can dip in and out. You don't have to use the whole training package. You can pick out different exercises, for example. So a key aim of the project really was to make all the materials freely available so that we can disseminate as widely as possible. I'm going to hand back over to Karina now for the strengths of the training.
Thank you very much, Rose. So, in case you haven't noticed, Rose and I are very passionate about this. We strongly feel that it does add something to the existing practice of safety training in the construction industry, in particular with regards to migrant workers. And some of the things that we think are really strengths of this training is, first of all, it's evidence-based. What we did was that we conducted a state-of-the-art literature review. And as Rose mentioned, we were hugely impressed by the literature review. Firstly, because there was no research or training, evaluation of training in Europe at all. And also because the latest paper had been published in 2013. So there's clearly a need to know more. But we wanted to make sure that we understand the situation, the present situation. So therefore, we also conducted focus groups and interviews with workers, with trainers, with supervisors, and with occupational safety and health practitioners. As we've also emphasized, is that the emphasis on soft skills. So it's not just about teaching workers about the technical skills, use of PPE, mechanical skills, these kind of things, but it's also understanding why safety is important and how can I work safely in the workplace, how can I detect what the hazards are and act on them, make the appropriate decisions, how can we work together as a team within the construction site to ensure good safety. In terms of the training methods, we focused on an interactive and participatory approach, making sure that we focus on how people learn, and learning models say that people learn through being involved, not just being passive recipients of training, but also being actively involved in discussing and using their own experiences. So we really tried to develop our training methods to reflect that. We also wanted to overcome the barriers of migrant workers working in isolation. So therefore, the training is open to migrant workers and non-migrant workers, so we can facilitate discussions during the training that hopefully will translate into collaboration once workers are back at the construction site. And our results do support that it is possible to create a collaborative climate in the construction site after training. We also tailored our training methods to workers with potential limited language skills and low literacy. So there are a lot of videos, pictures, games, not so much text, but much more focus on what can you do and what do things look like in the construction site. What we did was that we also tried to strengthen it by having both face-to-face training, so you can have the interaction, but you could also have online training, so that if you're struggling with something, you could go in and look at that in particular and do some tests, do some games, engage in some games to facilitate that additional learning, to make sure that you had understood what was going on in the training. And as Rose has also emphasized, and as I showed, we wanted to do a thorough scientific evaluation of the training, in particular, not only just whether it worked or not, but also what are the factors that can facilitate that the training is translated into actual changes in safety behaviors in the workplace. And we looked at the extent to which training was, or skills and knowledge could be translated into the workplace, or they needed some kind of adaptation before that happened. We found that wasn't the case. And we also looked at the extent to which supervisors and colleagues had supported the training. So these are the kind of strengths that we see in the training course. Rose has already mentioned that we've got a website. It has just been updated with the English material, but shortly we will also be providing Spanish and Italian versions of the training website, so you can have a look, and there's lots of information in there. We'll have information about the training itself, the evaluation material, the events that we have, the newsletters that we have sent out, the certification, the guidelines. There will be a link to the guidelines that Rose just presented. There are loads of safety training resources in there as well that we developed as part of our first output. We will also post our academic outputs there. So there's lots of information. So go and have a look, and hopefully you'll find something that you can use. We also have a LinkedIn group. So we welcome people to join it. We have discussions, we upload materials, we post news on it. So I would encourage you to sign up with us. If you want to sign up, either drop Rose and myself an email, and we will make sure that you get access to the LinkedIn. We also have a YouTube channel where we've got different videos. We have the videos from the training course, so you can go in and have a look at those. What we've actually found is that some of the trainers that conducted the training have used the training since, not in its entirety, but using different exercises and different bits and pieces from it, including the videos. So we're not necessarily advocating that you should implement the entire 4 walls, but you might want to use some of the exercises, some of these videos that could help you in your daily work as well, to promote safety in the construction site.